the boy king who made cruelty an art form. Joffrey orders Ned Stark's execution after promising mercy just to watch Sansa's face. He forces Sansa to look at her father's severed head. He torments her daily, having his guards beat her in open court. When a mob attacks, Joffrey hides while his people die. He shoots crossbow bolts at prostitutes for fun, gifted to him by Tyrion, using helpless women as target practice. At his own wedding, he humiliates Tyrion, pours wine on his head, and makes him his jester in front of the entire kingdom. Then he drinks from his wine cup. Within seconds, he's choking, clawing at his throat, his face turning purple. The wine was poisoned. Joffrey dies gasping for air like a fish, all his power meaning nothing, while his horrified mother watches helplessly. The boy who killed for sport dies in front of everyone. Nurse Ratched's voice, silenced forever. She runs the psychiatric ward like her personal dictatorship, crushing spirits with a smile. Ratched humiliates patients in group therapy, forcing them to reveal their deepest shames publicly. She weaponizes medication, using it to punish instead of heal. When Billy Bibbit finally finds confidence and sleeps with a woman, Ratched threatens to tell his mother, knowing his crippling shame will destroy him. Billy kills himself. She shows no remorse. McMurphy, who fought her control for months, finally snaps. He chokes her in front of everyone, ripping open her dress and exposing her. She survives, but something worse happens. Her voice is permanently damaged. The woman who controlled everything through calm, authoritative speech can now only make weak, raspy sounds. Her power came from her voice, and now it's gone forever. The patients no longer fear her. She's finished. By the way, if you're enjoying these satisfying villain endings, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss more content like this. We've got plenty more karma coming. The Queen Bee who rules high school through psychological warfare. Regina destroys girls' reputations with rumors, steals boyfriends for sport, and keeps a burn book filled with cruel lies about everyone. She pretends to befriend Katie while secretly trying to ruin her. When Regina gains weight from Katie's sabotage, she wears the same outfit that made her famous, forcing everyone to follow a rule she created. She photocopies the burn book and spreads it through the school, creating total chaos while keeping her hands clean. But Katie exposes her. Regina storms out in rage, gets hit by a bus, and breaks her spine. She survives but loses everything. Her army of followers abandons her. Her boyfriend dumps her. She ends up in lacrosse, channeling her rage into tackles instead of social manipulation. The girl who controlled everything becomes just another student, powerless and forgotten. Worse than Voldemort, because she hides evil behind politeness and rules. Umbridge takes over Hogwarts and bans defensive magic, while Voldemort rises to power. She forces Harry to carve "I must not tell lies" into his own hand with a cursed quill. She tries to use an illegal torture curse on students. When she becomes headmaster, she fires teachers, bans student organizations, and turns the school into a prison. Her cruelty isn't about power. It's about enjoying others' suffering while maintaining plausible deniability. She leads Harry into the Forbidden Forest and gets surrounded by centaurs. They don't kill her, but they traumatize her so badly that she's found later in the hospital wing, flinching at hoof sounds. The woman who loved control becomes so mentally broken, she can barely function. Later, she's sent to Azkaban for crimes against Muggleborns. The rule follower ends up in wizard prison, powerless forever. A Nazi commandant who shoots Jews from his balcony for entertainment. Goeth kills people for working too slowly, for working too fast, for existing. He beats his maid, Helen Hirsch, then tells her he wishes he could love her, making his abuse even more twisted. He liquidates the Krakow ghetto, murdering thousands while treating it like sport. Goeth represents the absolute worst of humanity, finding joy in genocide. When the war ends and Nazis are being prosecuted, Goeth is arrested. At his trial, he expects some special treatment, some recognition of his rank. Instead, he's convicted of mass murder. They hang him. But the most satisfying part isn't just his death, it's how small he becomes. Oskar Schindler saved over 1,000 lives and is remembered as a hero. Goeth murdered thousands and is remembered as exactly what he was, a cowardly monster who died swinging from a rope, forgotten except as a warning. The emperor who kills his own father for refusing to name him heir. Commodus murders Marcus Aurelius, then lies about it, playing the grieving son. He's weak, jealous, and obsessed with being loved while doing nothing to earn it. When Maximus won't pledge loyalty, Commodus orders his family murdered. He makes Maximus watch as soldiers ride to kill his wife and son. Then he forces Maximus into slavery as a gladiator, wanting him to die in the arena. Commodus represents entitled cruelty, someone given everything who still takes more. In the final fight, Commodus stabs Maximus before the battle, ensuring an advantage because he knows he'd lose fairly. But even wounded and dying, Maximus defeats him. Commodus dies in the dirt of the Colosseum. The crowd silent, no cheers, no love. The emperor who craved adoration dies alone and unmourned, while everyone mourns the slave who beat him. She seems like a sweet nurse who saves a famous author from a car crash. Then Paul Sheldon wakes up in her isolated home and realizes he's trapped. Annie isn't a fan. She's a psychotic captor. When she learns Paul killed off her favorite character, she forces him to burn his new manuscript. She breaks both his ankles with a sledgehammer to prevent escape. An act so casual, it's horrifying. She makes him write a new book exactly how she wants it, controlling his creativity through torture. Annie represents obsessive entitlement, believing her fandom gives her ownership over Paul's life. During their final confrontation, Paul fights back. He smashes her with his typewriter, the same machine she forced him to write with. She attacks, but he's no longer helpless. He beats her to death with it. The woman who controlled everything through violence dies by the same violence, killed by the very tool she weaponized against him. A terrorist who takes an entire building hostage on Christmas Eve. Gruber shoots Mr. Takagi in the head for refusing to give vault codes. He's cold, calculating, and pretends his actions are political when really he just wants money. When he realizes John McClane is causing problems, Gruber tries to manipulate him, pretending to be a hostage to get information. He threatens Holly, using her to control McClane. Gruber represents sophisticated evil, the villain who thinks he's smarter than everyone. In the final moments, Gruber holds Holly at gunpoint on the roof. McClane shoots the glass, and Gruber falls. But the best part is his face. Complete shock that the blue-collar cop outsmarted him. The mastermind who planned everything dies surprised. His perfect plan destroyed by someone he underestimated, falling from the building he thought he controlled. The kid next door, who tortures toys for fun. Sid rips toys apart and rebuilds them into nightmares. He straps a toy to a rocket and plans to blow it up. He's a budding psychopath who enjoys destruction. When he gets Woody and Buzz, he plans to destroy them too. Woody decides enough is enough. All the mutant toys Sid created come to life, surrounding him. Woody breaks the one rule: he talks. Sid's face goes white as Woody tells him, "We don't like being blown up or smashed or ripped apart." The toys advance on him, and Sid screams, running into his house. The bully who felt powerful tormenting defenseless toys becomes traumatized. In Toy Story 3, we see Sid as a garbage man, wearing the same skull shirt, clearly never recovered. The kid who loved breaking things ended up broken himself. The town hero, who's actually a narcissistic monster. Gaston expects Belle to marry him because he's handsome, ignoring her clear refusals. When she rejects him, he plots to have her father locked in an asylum unless she agrees. He manipulates the entire village into attacking the Beast's castle, leading a mob based on lies and fear. Gaston doesn't love Belle. He sees her as a trophy. During the fight, he stabs the Beast in the back, refusing to fight fairly. But Belle returns, and Beast fights back. Gaston begs for mercy, and Beast spares him. The moment Beast turns away, Gaston stabs him again. As he raises his knife for another strike, Gaston loses his footing and falls from the castle tower. The town hero dies from his own treachery, falling because he couldn't accept losing. No one mourns him. Belle and Beast get their happy ending, while Gaston becomes a cautionary tale. The archetypal bully who makes George McFly's life miserable for decades. Biff starts in high school calling George names, forcing him to do his homework, and sexually harassing Lorraine. He nearly rapes her at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance before George finally fights back. But in the original timeline, that moment of courage never happened. Adult Biff becomes George's supervisor and continues the torment, making George wax his car and mocking him in his own home. In the alternate 1985, when Biff gets the sports almanac, he becomes a corrupt casino mogul who murders George and forces Lorraine to marry him. He transforms Hill Valley into a dystopian nightmare ruled by his greed and violence. Biff represents how unchecked bullying creates monsters. The karma comes in layers. When Marty fixes the timeline, Biff ends up exactly where he belongs, waxing cars for the McFly family. The man who lorded power over George now works for him, stammering apologies and jumping at commands. In 2015, old Biff steals the DeLorean to give his younger self the almanac, but the act of creating that dark timeline causes him to fade from existence, dying in pain. The bully who tried to control time itself gets erased by his own greed. a religious fanatic who turns tragedy into a power grab. When monsters trap people in a grocery store, Mrs. Carmody declares it's God's judgment. She starts as an annoyance, then becomes dangerous. She manipulates frightened people into following her, creating a cult inside the store. When someone needs to be sacrificed to appease the monsters, she points to a soldier. The crowd nearly kills him before David stops it. Then, she demands they sacrifice a child. People actually consider it. This woman has turned survivors into a mob. Before she can take the child, Ollie shoots her, once in the stomach, once in the head. The religious zealot, who claimed divine authority, dies instantly, and her spell over the crowd breaks. People realize what they almost did. Mrs. Carmody's body falls, and nobody mourns. The woman who fed on fear dies afraid, and everyone sees her for what she was. A pro golfer who can't stand being upstaged. When Happy joins the tour, Shooter mocks his background, his swing, and his grandmother. He tries to sabotage Happy at every turn, hiring a heckler to disrupt his game. When that doesn't work, Shooter orchestrates Happy's removal from the tour by staging a fight. Then, he buys Happy's grandmother's house at auction, just to be cruel. Shooter represents petty jealousy, someone who can't win fairly so he cheats. In the final tournament, Happy beats him legitimately. But the best karma? The man who couldn't handle losing loses everything. His title, his career, his dignity. Happy gets the jacket, the girl, and saves his grandmother's house while Shooter is dragged off the course, screaming and irrelevant. An oil tycoon who destroys everything he touches in pursuit of wealth. Plainview adopts HW, not out of love, but because a man with a son seems more trustworthy to investors. When HW loses his hearing in a drilling accident, Plainview sees him as damaged goods and ships him to a school to get him out of the way. He sabotages his own son's happiness, driving away the woman HW loves because it threatens Plainview's control. When his supposed half-brother Henry arrives, Plainview shoots him dead after discovering he's an imposter, burying the body without hesitation. He crushes competitors, manipulates religious leaders, and poisons entire communities with his greed. Plainview represents unchecked capitalism, a man who gains the whole world but loses his soul. The karma comes through isolation. Years later, Plainview lives alone in his mansion, wealthy beyond measure but completely alone. HW finally stands up to him, rejecting the Plainview name and starting his own company. Daniel's response? Disowning him with vicious cruelty. When Eli Sunday, the preacher he once humiliated, comes begging for money, Plainview forces him to renounce his faith, then beats him to death with a bowling pin. He's left screaming, "I'm finished!" in his empty mansion, surrounded by wealth, but destroyed by his own hatred, having driven away everyone who could have given his life meaning. A warlord who controls the citadel through water rationing. Joe hoards water while people below die of thirst, releasing just enough to keep them desperate. He keeps women as breeding stock, treating them like property to produce healthy heirs. He brands people, turns men into war boys willing to die for him, and rules through cult-like devotion. Joe represents tyranny, using religion and resources to maintain absolute power. When his wives escape with Furiosa and Max, Joe pursues them with his entire army. The chase devastates the wasteland. In the final battle, Joe tries to reclaim his wives, treating them as objects even as everything falls apart. Furiosa fires a harpoon that rips through his jaw and breathing apparatus, tearing out his throat. Joe dies instantly on top of the Gigahorse. His body is later brought back to the Citadel, where the wretched, the starving masses he oppressed, tear him apart in fury. The tyrant who controlled everything dies violently, and his body becomes proof to everyone that he was just a mortal man, not an immortal god. A fascist military officer in 1940s Spain who embodies pure authoritarianism. Vidal is obsessed with his father's legacy and his own image as a strong leader. He tortures Republican rebels with cold precision, smashing a farmer's face with a bottle until it's unrecognizable, all based on mere suspicion. He forces his pregnant wife Carmen to live in his remote outpost, caring nothing for her health or comfort, only for the son she's carrying to continue his bloodline. When Carmen dies in childbirth because of his neglect, Vidal shows no grief, only concern for the baby. He tortures people in front of his stepdaughter, Ophelia, beats his housekeeper Mercedes when he discovers her betrayal, and rules through fear and violence. Vidal represents fascism at its most personal and cruel. A man who values order and legacy over humanity. The karma arrives when the rebels finally close in. Vidal knows he's finished, so he cleans himself up, clutching his son, and walks outside. He tries to hand the baby to Mercedes, asking her to tell his son what time his father died, preserving his legacy. Mercedes looks him in the eye and says, "No, he won't even know your name." Then they shoot him in the face. The man obsessed with legacy dies nameless. His son will grow up, never knowing the monster who fathered him. Everything Vidal fought for, his name, his legacy, his immortality through his son, dies with him in the mud. The jealous brother who murders his way to the throne. Scar kills Mufasa, his own brother, then makes young Simba believe it's his fault. He exiles the cub and takes over Pride Rock. Under Scar's rule, the Pride Lands become a wasteland. He lets hyenas overrun everything, doesn't care about the land or the pride. When Simba returns years later, Scar tries to manipulate him again, forcing him to confess to Mufasa's murder publicly. But his plan fails. Cornered, Scar blames the hyenas, calling them the enemy. As flames surround Pride Rock, Scar begs Simba for mercy. Simba spares him but tells him to run away forever. Scar pretends to leave, then attacks. Simba throws him off the cliff. Scar survives the fall but lands among the hyenas he just betrayed. They emerge from the smoke, having heard everything. The last thing Scar sees is his former allies coming for revenge. The schemer who manipulated everyone dies, betrayed by his own betrayals, eaten by those he used. If you made it this far, you clearly love watching villains get what they deserve. Make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.